course, the attack in London at about 8:20 local time, and another missile launch by North Korea late Thursday. First, we're going to go over to England, where an explosion on a crowded subway train left dozens injured. Kitty Logan is live in London. Kitty, we've been through this far too many times this year.
Yes, and yet again, Brian, ISIS has claimed responsibility for planting this device, although police here in London are treating that claim with somewhat a sceptical view. They're still investigating the trail of the suspects and potential accomplices who left that bomb on the busy commuter train this morning. As you say, the device detonated around 8:30 this morning local time at the height of the rush hour. At that time, trains on that line are typically very crowded. There was panic, as you can imagine, also on the platform, with eyewitness reports of people being trampled. Witnesses also describe a flash and smoke, and many of the 29 injured have burns. Now, images of the device show wires protruding out of the plastic carrier bag which was used to transport it. Police are calling this a terrorist incident, and the government held an emergency meeting in response. British Prime Minister Theresa May says the device could have caused significant harm. It is the 5th terror attack in the UK this year, and today the Prime Minister announced the terror threat level here would be increased to critical. Now, that goes along with new figures yesterday indicating the number of terror arrests in this country was at its highest ever over the past year. Police haven't yet released any details of a potential suspect in this attack. They're trawling through their security cameras. Right. But tonight here in London, police have assured us that they're making good progress with that investigation, and meanwhile there will be more police and soldiers out on the streets. Brian?
Right. Kitty, thanks so much. And of course they're doing this by cutting back their money they're spending in law enforcement, which is unfathomable. Today is the 5th bombing terrorist incident in the UK this year. What does that country do to deserve this type of attack, if anything? Or have they dropped their guard? Douglas Murray is the author of this book, The Strange Death of Europe. And you write, Doug, that Europe is committing suicide. Is this an example of it?
I'm afraid I think it's just the latest chapter in what's going to be a very long and very bloody story. Just also today is worth just noting that there were 2 attacks in France, one a knife-wielding attack on a soldier in Paris, and the other a hammer-wielding attacker shouting Allahu Akbar, who attacked 2 women on the street in Lyon. We're getting sort of used to this in Europe, but whether or not it's something we ought to become used to is another question.
Of course you shouldn't get used to it. In fact, that's exactly what they want, because you say this is not going to be a massive revolution of an invading army. It's going to be a slow takeover of Europe. And if you get used to the knife attacks and the subway explosions, that's exactly what they want. And you're looking mostly at a second generation of immigrants.
Well, that's right. I mean, the phenomenon I describe in my book is what I say is just the massive turnover of population in Europe, the basically completely open external borders and the absent internal borders in Europe that mean that a lot of European governments, the British government isn't as bad as this as some, but a lot of European governments have basically no idea who's in their country, where they're from, who they are, what their affiliations are. We keep discovering time and time again that the people who carry out attacks like the one today, the ones that are successful and the ones that aren't, are people with backgrounds where they're affiliated with terrorist groups, they've known people, they've been to training camps, they've come in and out of Europe using migrant routes, all this sort of stuff. We've been warned about this for a long time. People like me have warned about these consequences for a very long time. But I just feel that we're just going to keep on seeing this same thing replay again and again.
I admire the British for keeping a stiff upper lip and continue to march on. But in a way, they need to show more emotion, that this will not stand, in order for their leaders to understand they won't have a job if this continues.
Yes, this is a very important point. We in Britain in particular, with the terrorist attacks we've had this year, I'm thinking of things like the Manchester Ariana Grande concert attack, we've now moved very swiftly from the attack, and mercifully of course in today's attack no dead, but we have been moving very swiftly even over the dead to within 48 hours getting on to the Let's Not Look Back in Anger, John Lennon's Imagine and so on. And it's almost as if we don't want to linger on what's happened, and we We want to move on and pretend it didn't happen. And that, I think, is because politicians and others are very wary of the public on this, and maybe understandably so, but what they want not to happen is for the public to turn around and say, why is this happening to us? We didn't used to have, I mean, we had other forms of terrorism. We had the IRA terrorism. We never had Islamist terrorism like this in the past. Why is this happening now? And I think that the public should be asking those questions. We should be demanding answers. But our political leaders are very wary of that because they know that this anger will be directed in various directions, and one of them at some stage will be at the political leaders who brought this about.
Right. You know,